adaptation and energy transition, we as individuals have an important role to play as well. I'm very glad to now invite on stage someone who has demonstrated quite successfully that solutions to climate-induced problems need not be complicated or expensive. And here's hoping that after this session, we all go away inspired. Please put your hands together for Sonam Wangchuk, engineer turned education reformer, innovator and founding director at SECMOL. Mr. Wangchuk, kindly join us on stage, and thank you very much for being with us. And let's also put our hands together for Mr. Shangvi.
Thank you. This time I was actually in the hall, so I'm not late. What we're going to do, we've decided, I'm going to ask Sonam to talk a little bit about the things he cares about. We'll have a conversation, and then we'll throw this open to the audience. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, all of you, for having me here and making me specially at home with an overly air-conditioned hall. I came dressed for Mumbai, but I see many of you dressed for Ladakh. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why we are having lots of problems with our glaciers. So I wanted to convey to people in big cities the message that, you know, the way we live lives in big cities has a huge impact on the fragile ecology of the mountains like Ladakh. It's the lifestyle in the big cities where all this emissions, pollution happen. And not only that, it's what we think is our needs or desires that makes all the mining, all the extraction happen in the mountains, which are so fragile that very soon we'll lose all the glaciers, which will not only make life difficult for us in the mountains, but very soon you all in the big cities also, because 2 billion people depend directly or indirectly on the glaciers of the Himalayas and Hindu Kush, which is like 1/4 of the population. So these water sources should be treated as sacred, and people living their lives, if they lived simpler lives, there'll be less need of extraction and exploitation of these. So it is with this humble message that I've come. Please live simply in your big cities so that we in the mountains may simply live.
I wanted to ask you that we are a people who worship glaciers. We worship the rivers that come from the glaciers. And yet, we seem to have so little consciousness of what global warming is doing, what climate change is doing, and we live in this bubble thinking it won't affect us. Why is that?
I think the worship of the rivers and forests and trees is from our ancient Indian values.
Yeah.
And the exploitation and get-rich-quick material development is from modern Western path or lost path. And therefore, we should find our roots in our past to the way of progress which was more inside than outside. You know, 2,500 years ago, Gautama the Buddha gave this message to the world that it's a bigger achievement for human beings to conquer a desire than to fulfill 1,000 desires.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, today we are chasing after fulfilling desires rather than conquering desires. If we had chosen the right path, we wouldn't have made a mess of this planet. And this spirit and this value is what can make us a Vishwa Guru. Not being, you know, second-rate chasers of the values of the West that has landed this planet in a mess. So if we want to be a Vishwa Guru, we better show a different path of working on the demand side, minimizing desires rather than only addressing the supply side of materials, of raw materials, of minerals. All the minerals and materials of the world will not fulfill your bucket. if the bucket has no bottom, what Buddha said was about putting a bottom to the bucket so that you can be contented with the minimum.
You know, you mentioned the West and Western values. Do you think that after 1991, after liberalization, after globalization, in a sense, we became much more a consumerist society, much more focused on ourselves, on what we're doing now, less focused on the world we're leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren?
Yes, I do, after liberalization, but already we were on the path of this external material development as development. Maybe it was suppressed and suffocated before liberalization. It just gave an opening vent to that. But we need to go back to values of internal, growth rather than only external, which has not much to do with the liberalization. I mean, we could have been a suppressed nation.
Okay. One criticism that the West has always had of India and of China is that when there are international treaties about climate change or whatever, we take the line that for so long you guys were irresponsible, you polluted the earth, you became rich. Now when our people finally have a chance, you want to hold us back with all kinds of limitations and restrictions. Is that a fair argument?
No, I don't think, I really don't think. Just because they made mistakes, we don't have to do the same. Finally, it is the same planet that will be affected. I agree, though, that poverty has no, dignity or anything. So, bringing people out of abject poverty to a dignified life is great. But then to become rich and super rich and, have 40 pairs of shoes and 5 houses, that's not what Indian values is about. So, as far as it is to bring people to a decent, dignified life, I would agree. But beyond that, to just do the same because they have made a mess, it doesn't make sense.
It's greedy and short-sighted.
Greed and need. There's enough for your needs, but not enough for greeds, and better not demand the same.
You were here for the last session. So one of the speakers spoke about wanting to create a spiritual India. Are we creating a spiritual India, or are we creating an India with symbols, visible symbols of religion that don't necessarily change the way we think inside?
I don't know about spirituality, but what I find value in is in simplicity of life and finding happiness and contentment from small things, simpler things, because there is no limit to what you keep doing, and it's like chasing shadows in the current context. For example, if you love mangoes, they are very sweet, but if you are given sugar to eat, suddenly mangoes feel tasteless. Nothing happened to the mangoes, but you spoiled yourself, and now your satisfaction level needs something else. So that's not how it should be. I wouldn't complicate it with very high.
Let me ask you a simple question. You are a man who's widely admired because of the simplicity of his own lifestyle, because of his going out to do things for the world, not just for himself. So let's talk about, we talk about needs and all that. What makes you happy in your life?
It makes me happy to see other people happy, or at least their sufferings relieved, their pains relieved, and that's what my aim always has been. People ask me, what is your inspiration? I always say, it needn't be always inspiration to achieve something. Rather, necessities of doing things have led me to do what I'm doing, not because someone inspired me to, some greatness or anything. I'm just doing what needs to be done out of empathy.
Were you always like this? Did you change your mind? Did you come to this realization gradually? Or was this always the kind of person you were?
Well, I was lucky to have grown up in a very tiny village in Ladakh, which is very far away, remote enough to be cut off from the rest of the world for 6 months right now, And in that region, I was born in a village with 5 households. Therefore, there were no schools.
Five? Just five, all right.
Yes. But I always say, today it's no longer that village. It has grown 100%. 10 households. So what I wanted to say was, in that village we had no schools.
Yeah.
So I had a different childhood. Till 9 I was with my mother, with my villagers and so on. So I learned from my mother and my village, and empathy was a very strong value that I learned from them. Unfortunately, in schools it's the opposite. You are taught and trained to trample on others and come first. So I feel very lucky seeing the state of schools that I was spared that, and I could learn directly from nature, from people, from traditions and so on. So maybe that's one of the
reasons. When did you go to school? When did you get educated if you were brought up in this very small village? In terms of education, given that you were basically taught by your family, when did you go out into the wider community? At what age?
Afterwards, yeah. By 9 I was dragged out of my village by kind relatives who told my mother that he better be sent to school, and actually I would say with that ended my true learning.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
Where? First in some villages in Ladakh and then in Kashmir.
You say there ended your true learning. But that means what? You became competitive, you saw the world for what it was. What was it like for you, the experience?
I was earlier on the field with farmers, seeing seeds go in the ground, roots go down, shoots come up, leaves unfurl, without having to memorize spellings and so on. Well, all that was cut off and I was sent into dark, dingy classrooms memorizing L-E-A-F, leaf, L-E-A-V-E-S, leaves, without connecting to what the real thing is. So there ended my true learning. It became all theoretical. Mark Twain says, I've never allowed my schooling to interfere with my education. And a beautiful Urdu version of that, that very few know. This poet says, a sheikh is the alim, the teacher. I love languages, so I learnt Urdu poetry. A sheikh bahut achhi maktab ki faza, lekin your school and its environment is interesting, O sheikh. Bante hain bayaba mein. Bayaba is wilderness in the valleys and mountains and hardships. Bante hain bayaba mein Faruqi wa Sulaimani. People like Faruqi and Sulaimani, who are like great people, are not made in the four walls of your school. They are made in the wilderness of villages like mine.
That's very true. That's very profound. No? And now, when you see the new generation addicted not just to consumerism, but to screens, with no sense of the earth, no sense of the things that come from the earth. Every time they see a vegetable or a fruit, it comes in a packet from a shop. They're completely cut off from our environment. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel very sad, because education is such an important gift. Not because it is important for jobs and all those things. This is one phase of life where you have spent like 15 to 20 years of your youth as captive audience to teachers, to the nation. And we make a mess of that and then expect people to learn from conferences like these. 1 hour, 1 day, which people don't have even time. Whereas you have spent 15 to 20 years listening to lectures, but the lectures were wrong. Because those lectures were meant for a time when the world was coming out of hunger and needs, poverty and so on. And therefore they were based on production, consumption, exploitation. Now we have overdone it. Overdone to the extent that the very canvas on which we paint is destroyed. And yet we give the same fuel. More of the same will not give you different results, as Einstein said. Now is the time to change this education system to become a healing effect rather than same harming effect. We can understand back then there was a need. Now this education should be about how to live in harmony with nature, so you don't destroy the ground on which you stand. Unfortunately, that's not happening. Our young are a lost cause. They're lectured at home, lectured in school, nothing to really do in real world, and therefore they take refuge in mobile phones and all such, and much worse in substance abuse and depression and all such things.
You're one of the gentlest people I know, but pretend for a moment you're not so gentle and assume I made you dictator of India. What are the 5 things you would do?
Dictator of India? Okay.
You could do what you wanted. What are the 5 things you would do?
I don't know 5, but I would bring true democracy. As a dictator,
Explain.
I would bring true...
What is true democracy?
True democracy, I love it when Modi ji says, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The world is one family.
Yeah.
But I have a problem in that one family is not just of human beings. That one family should also count all the nature, the Vanaspatya Shanti, as we say.
Okay.
Prithvi Shanti. All the animals, flora, fauna, the wild nature. Democracy will be true democracy when we have a vote for them also. Right now, we give so many votes to Delhi or Mumbai because there are so many people. Ladakh, which is 60,000 kilometers square, much larger than most states, has 1 MP. Just because there are only 300,000 people. But it's 300,000 people. There's so much vast nature, flora, fauna, very sensitive area. There should be more votes to the nature of Himalayas. So true democracy will bring representation of nature in our parliaments, in our discourse, so that we make decisions based on other siblings in our nature, not just us human beings, no?
Okay, so that's one thing. I said 3 things.
Then
Number 2?
Secondly, I would make education very different. I'd make the most of this tradition that people spend the whole of their childhood and youth in it, to groom them to respect nature, to groom them to live the ideals that India is known for. I would even bring change in religion.
No, hang on, we are still at education. Would you get rid of exams?
Would you?
End examinations?
Of the kind that we
have now,
I will assess students, not to fail them, but to know what I have done wrong and what I should do better.
Okay, so we've got education, we've got democracy, and third you said religion. Tell me about that.
Religion, because the current religions, you will see all of them speak of peace. Peace, Shanti, Ahimsa, which to me means that there was Himsa sometime long ago. It's like an antigen, you don't know COVID from the virus, you know it from the antibodies. So similarly, when all religions speak of peace, I understand that there was lack of peace, there were violence. And you can understand, as hunter-gatherers, we were perhaps very violent. We would open up a skull if we differ and get away with it. And very clever people of the times came up with the concept of God. Someone very, very much stronger than the biggest brute. And that worked. Violence became non-existent. Today, human violence of the kind with knives and daggers has become like number 26th or so in cause of death. I was looking up in the internet. What are the number 1, 2, 3 causes of death? Is all environment related or lifestyle related. So there is big violence today also, just that it is not with guns and daggers. It's with stylish cars and houses and dresses and almirahs full of them. So I would declare lifestyle also as a cause of violence, and therefore would count this form of violence in the religious discourse, that violence is not just when you see guns and daggers, violence is in the lifestyle that you live.
A broader definition of ahimsa and hinsa, you would say.
Yes, therefore bring in the discourse of lifestyle. I love it when India led by the Prime Minister, gives to the world the mission life, lifestyles for environment. Now India needs to lead by living it so that others can take it if we are to become a Vishwaguru. If we only chase their lifestyles and say we are Vishwaguru, nobody will believe.
Okay, I can take one question, I think. Anybody with a question? Yeah, the gentleman here. We give him a microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Pankaj. I'm part of Chrome DM. So I'm a big time advocate of complete eradication of single-use plastic. And it's great to see that most of the bottles out here, you'll see glass bottles and most of the properties as well.
Yeah.
However, if you walk into any office today, Sonam, everyone practically uses those small little plastic disposable bottles, which are so convenient to use. But the fact is how dangerous they are in terms of the plastic dissolving in the water is pretty evident to you and I.
Yeah.
And the question that I want to do is about the Leh airport. It's very obvious that it could have been a carbon neutral airport, an environment friendly airport. But how long can you sustain this fight? At times does it get really frustrating and you want to just take a back seat knowing that the decision makers can't be so dumb. Everyone can see this, right? It's a disaster in the making.
I think we got the question.
Okay.
Okay, there's two questions here.
Yeah. About the airport, I'm happy to say that it's being made into a carbon neutral airport as we had pushed. Not exactly in the same ways, but it will be a carbon neutral airport. Regarding single-use plastic, I think it's not just leaders making policies, because I remember the government had banned single-use plastic, but they had to take it back, not because the leaders lacked will, but because there was not enough awareness and sensitization among the people. So nobody cheered. Instead, some industries that lost compelled the government to take it back. So it's the people who need to be educated and mobilized to not want it, and by showing what it does, which is again education. When I said education, it was not just about schools and classrooms, but as much about grown-ups.
Okay, last question. We have like 15 seconds left. On a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you about the future of our planet?
Future of our
planet.
Right now, I'm not. But if we get our act together and people become first aware and then assert themselves, I'm sure we can make the most. For example, the sensitive, fragile mountains of Ladakh. I have been demanding from people to live simply. Similarly, I've been demanding from the government to make policies to safeguard them, entire Himalayas, and particularly in the case of Ladakh. There is a constitutional safeguard in 6th schedule, which the people have been demanding and the government has promised. Twice it was top on the manifestos and elections were won, but then they slowly backtracked, and now I would really like, if we are to say Vasudeva Kutumbakam, then we should have policies in place to protect fragile nature and culture. The indigenous tribal culture of Ladakh needs to be protected. If such steps are taken, based on the promises they have made, 1/3 of Ladakh's population came out on streets to remind them of their promise, then I will have some hope from the future of planet and democracy.
Let's hope you're right, and let's hope we can be optimistic about our planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Wangchuk. Please do stay on stage as I call on Sarita Kaushik from ABP Majha and also Rajat Bhaskar from Nexus Alliance to please join us on stage and present a token of our gratitude to someone who's really been inspiring us for years now and continues to do so. Let's hear it for Sonam Wangchuk, ladies and gentlemen. And a special thanks once again to Mr. Shangvi for doing the honors. Thank you, Rajat, and thank you, Sarita.